I will call the July 12th meeting of the Traffic Review Advisory Board meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome. The Traffic Review Board reviews items of interest regarding parking and traffic items. We are an advisory board, and our favorable recommendations today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council. The council can accept or reject any recommendation from this board. If you do not agree with our decision, you can discuss the item with any council member. If the board does not recommend an item, a common council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding the item. All items require 2 readings before the common council. The first reading will take place on Tuesday, July 26th at 6 p.m. and you will be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will take no action. On Tuesday, August 9th at 6 p.m., the item will be on a second reading, at which time the council will actually take action. You will again be allowed to speak. For this afternoon's meeting, I will read each agenda item, at which time, if you'd like to speak, please step up to the podium and give your name and address for the record. I do ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to the board for discussion and action. Please call the roll.
Szynski?
Here.
Stepanek?
Here.
Wanschneider?
Here.
Becker?
Here.
Christensen?
Here.
Haas?
Here.
Ross?
First item on today's agenda is approval of minutes.
Move. Second.
Any discussion? I actually do have one item as it relates to the agenda, and Mr. Collins and I had spoken about this. Last meeting when we had actually talked about the request to designate Fifth Ave as a one-way from 6th to Nebraska. One of the questions I asked during the meeting was, had Mr. Lindeman been made part of the conversation? The minutes reflect that, and I'm looking for the exact comment. David Buck also said Sweetwater was okay with this plan. Again, Sweetwater being Jason Lindeman, the owner thereof. I came to later find out that, well, in fact, he is okay with the plan. He wasn't actually involved in the discussion, and I thought it best to bring that to the board's attention. It's not going to change my position on the issue, but I would ask that the minutes be changed to reflect that Mr. Lindeman is in fact okay with the proposal, but that he was not in fact part of that initial conversation. I'd make that as a proposed amendment to the minutes, just to accurately reflect the situation.
Well, actually, but what I did learn today is he was part of the conversation, but he had it with Andy Dumpke and Chet Wiesenberg,
which has no representation in the city, though. And again, my point, Jim, is that the city actually owes him that conversation.
Yeah, it sounds like it was done, but it was the developers that were all discussing it together. And I guess and I don't know what happened after that, but from, like you said, Mr. Lindeman's okay with everything.
He is okay with it now. I did take the opportunity to talk with him after the fact. Again, if no one else agrees, I will yield to that, but no one? Okay, all right. That being the case, call the roll for the approval of the minutes.
Szynski?
Aye.
Stepanek?
Aye.
Wanschneider?
Aye.
Becker?
Abstain.
Christensen?
Abstain.
Haas?
Aye.
Carried. 5.
There, 1, 2, 3. We had 4 ayes.
Oh,
Charlie?
yes, excuse me, 4. You're
4?
correct.
Okay, all right, I lost track there for a second.
You're correct.
Okay, because I thought we were at 3, which wouldn't have allowed it to carry. All right, public comment. Anyone have any comment that is not related to this afternoon's agenda? Only an officer in the crowd? I would assume the case to be no then. So we will move on to new business. At Mr. Collins' request, if no one objects, we're going to flip the order of the agenda items so as to allow the bike lane folks to be on with their day, or get on with their day. So not seeing any objection, A request for bike lanes on North Main Street from Irving Ave to New York Ave. Current status, no bike lane.
Okay, this is a request for, right now, as you may be aware, North Main Street, they are, as part of the reconstruction from the Harrison, New York intersection up to Murdoch, bike lanes are being installed as part of that DOT-led project. What this is it's a request to add bike lanes from Irving up to that intersection in New York and Harrison where the DOT is starting their bike lanes. Currently, the street is 48 feet wide, which would allow enough space for bike lanes without making any changes to parking. There are a few areas where there isn't currently parking, but it's not due to the width of the road, it's due to like the intersect corner clearances and things like that. So with the street being 48 street wide, what this would be, it would basically be an 8-foot parking lane on each side, then a 5-foot bike lane, and then 11-foot lane of travel in each direction. And then it would potentially connect to Irving and in New York Avenue, where New York Avenue has Sharrow markings, and Irving, depending on the council vote, may have bike lanes in the near future. So this would extend the Main Street bike route down further to the south, and I think I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add, Alexa. Alexa's here from our planning department, and then she also kind of has the map that shows some of the bike connections.
Yeah, that map just shows where the parking currently is restricted on Main Street. There are a few sections, and then you can see the greater map will show how it will connect wide. And pending the council approval tonight, actually, it will be a really good connection for East Irving and West Irving. And there's no parking to be removed. It's wide enough.
So we're talking about this stretch here from Irving to New York. This is where the bike lanes are currently being installed, and this is where they're being proposed.
Has any consideration been given to the transition from south of New York to north of New York, if that makes any sense? Because that, albeit, is an ugly intersection. I think we can all agree.
Right. Yeah, we haven't got into the formal design yet. You know, we'd have to work on that with the engineering folks.
Well, has the state put together its engineering on that?
They have it starting here, the transition, so they have it north.
Right.
But they haven't done anything south.
That's our responsibility,
Right.
Ultimately. And again, all I'm suggesting is that might make this a little easier sell to, for certain me, just to see how that's going to transition.
Transitions, yeah.
Because I can envision some problems at that corner, you know, with the way Harrison comes in at that goofy angle.
Right. So if we'd recommend improving it, what we would do then is we'd work with engineering folks to lay that out, obviously. That's kind of the same thing, you know, depending what council decides on Irving. The engineering department's done some preliminary analysis on how we transition in and out of the intersections at Main and Jackson. So it'd be more of a technical detail, but yes, we would do that.
Are you suggesting we chicken versus egg, which one should come first, I guess is my question to you, because it'd make me more comfortable if I saw at least some preliminary.
Sure. I guess my recommendation would be that if we're okay with the bike lanes in general, that the transitions would be secondary to that, because ultimately, if we do the bike lanes, we'll have to figure out the transitions through those intersections. So,
well, who's to say if it's not going to come out to be reasonably safe, then why do it in the first place? If that's what we discover. And again, I'm not suggesting that, but again, the way that intersection lays out is kind of ugly.
I don't know if we could, you know, we can do the engineering drawings on the transition through the intersection, and we could give you some type of schematic. Now, whether, I don't know if I can tell you how safe it's going to be or not.
No, but at least it gives us some idea.
Yeah. I mean, I could ask them to do a schematic. I don't know if that's going to.
Anyone else want to comment on that particular issue? I mean, yeah.
I just wanted to know what happens when we get up to Murdoch? Is it terminated there?
Right now, it currently, it would end there.
Yeah, and then is there a projection down the road?
Or north of Murdoch?
Well, yeah, somewhere, either on Murdoch or.
Well, we haven't looked further into that. It is in the plan to continue it, but these are just for 2016. We're focusing on creating connections, so.
Just end there then for now.
Yeah, it is terminating at Murdoch. But if we don't get any bike lanes in on this proposed area between New York and Irving, there will be just floating bike lanes on North Main Street, just out there alone. So the goal is so that when there are bikers traveling north or south, they'll have someplace to continue to go, possibly connect to Irving, depending on what happens. So we're going to have to do something with it.
Yeah, I always wonder if Sharo from there north or.
I can't speak to what we'll be doing for north of that. I don't know.
Not too heavily traveled vehicle. Cheryl would probably work there.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what was in the plan, but I know there is a plan to get so that we can eventually connect to County Park.
Right.
I can't remember if it was a Cheryl or bike lane. I'm thinking maybe it was a Cheryl.
Else have any questions, discussion? Officer, go ahead.
I'm Officer Sapan. I'm with the police department. In regards to the bike lanes, as far as my personal observations, not only being in a squad car for 8 hours a day, but also being on bike patrol in the city, I find that having bike lanes, especially on busier roads, is a huge help. Not only for pedestrian traffic, but for bike traffic and for automobile traffic, as bikes then have a lane for themselves. A lot of times, especially on Main Street, now their sidewalks are a little bit wider for people to walk up and down, but the only option that we have at that point is to either go on the sidewalk and share with the pedestrians, which can cause a hazard, or to go on the road, which is perfectly legal, but at the same time, that is a very busy section of town, and traffic already moves slow, and to try to go either around a bike or to have a bike block a lane can cause somewhat of a traffic hazard at that point in time. We find that bike lanes, like I said, are very useful. They make it safe, and I guess that's my comment towards that.
And I'd like to point out that the goal here is to make sure that once that North Main Street section is completed, that we have some kind of complete portion, and the painting season is very limited. So this is somewhat of a time-sensitive thing that we would like to get forward so we can get it implemented. So there's not this bike lane floating out there leading people just to Murdoch and New York.
Is it reasonable to expect, Mr. Collins, that we can get some preliminary drawings by the next meeting, and does that meet the painting timeline?
It's going to be tough because right now the engineering folks are in construction season, so I mean, I can request it, but it might take them a little while to put it together, and then it has to be over 60 degrees to paint. So assuming, let's see, we're beginning of July, and then it has to go to 2 council readings before it would get implemented.
Tight. Yeah.
It'd be tight. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's up to you guys. I understand your point, but I don't know if it would.
Yeah.
Would you be able to
hinder the-
coordinate with the DOT to make sure that that intersection is cohesive and work with our engineering
Right.
department?
Yeah, that's what we would do.
We would do that, so.
What's the consensus on the board? Do we want to see drawings before we move forward? I see a couple heads nod. Dan, Ben?
I'm comfortable moving it forward now, but I understand if the board wants to see drawings too. I mean, I don't necessarily, have a hugely strong opinion here, but
Well, I'm just concerned about coming up Main Street and someone wanting to go right on New York, right on Harrison, or straight up Main Street. That's going to be, I mean, are we going to put a lane restriction on the bike lane at that point?
I'm
Because-
assuming probably what happens often at intersections is the bike lane will dissolve, a little bit ahead of the intersection, and then the bikes will have to move into traffic. I'm not 100% positive, but I'm assuming something like that's going to happen.
Yeah,
there.
that's how it was for the Irving bike lanes. It was
Right,
kind of
and that's all I
default.
want to see is some preliminary documentation from that, so that we can tell people that this is the way it's going to be, so that there's no surprise, ultimately.
Well, we would definitely have them ready for the council meeting.
I don't have a problem moving it forward right now either. Like, a lot of places, the bike lanes kind of just end or something. Like, I use Osborne a lot, and when you get to Kohler, it just ends, you know, and you just don't have to, like, go to the sidewalk or through the business parking lots or...
Yeah, we have a lot of other bike lanes that are similar, already implemented. This wouldn't be that different than any other bike lanes that we already have.
Well, I do believe it's a little different, though, Alexis, given that intersection in particular. I mean, it's like trying to run a bike lane through the intersection at Oshkosh Ave and Sawyer. I mean, it's,
Yeah, like, we had that discussion,
yeah,
put those bike lanes in.
yeah, so, yep, exactly.
So I don't know, though, that we can definitely scheme something up, but like I said, I'm assuming it's probably going to end before the intersection. That's a 5-legged intersection, so the bikes are probably going to have to merge in with traffic, and then, so the schematic you get might just show the bike lane ending before the intersection is probably what it's going to be. It'll show,
And then
you
take
know,
up again
cross-section, right?
30, 40 feet north of the intersection on either one of the legs.
Type of situation for that.
Well, it'll be bike lanes, and again, this is hypothetically, then it'll dissolve into the intersection, and then it'll pick up again north.
How about the Charlo symbol where it's non-existent?
Where,
Shortly in advance of the intersection.
Right.
Before it begins.
right, usually they'll have a sign like bike lane ends, and then another one says bike lane begins, but
Yeah, well,
Okay.
something on the road is not too.
No. Anyone else? You look like you were going to say something. Okay.
It would be nice to have that drawing, but I don't know if it's going to be much different than what Jim just said. It's
Well, and that was going to be my comment. So long as it's laid out and dealt with in the manner that's been discussed, and I see Marlene down there feverishly writing, so hoping it will. You've done a nice job in allaying my fears or my concerns as it relates to that, so.
Yeah, I just think this is an opportunity to be proactive to kind of match up with what the DOT is doing. So if we delay it another month, then there's the risk of having these just floating out there.
If we decide to move it along, council will have all that information in the
Of
preliminary.
course, yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Last call? You actually get a second?
I'll second it.
Call the roll.
Szynski,
Aye.
Stepanik,
Aye.
Weinschneider,
Aye.
Becker,
Aye.
Christensen,
Aye.
Haas.
Aye.
Carried.
Right, which brings us to our second agenda item, which is really agenda item number 1, which is last year's annual crash report, delivered courtesy of Mr. Collin.
all right, what I think I'll do is, in case anybody's watching it here, I'll put it up on the screen here. What I'm going to do, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but what I'll do is just kind of try to pick out the highlights. So what the department's done historically, and my predecessors, is put together a report every year, going back for quite a number of years, just to analyze the crash history for the previous year. They did it, they used to do it manually off of the police records, which was very cumbersome. Now what we do is the DOT has a crash portal, which is still pretty cumbersome, but it's, at least the data's there. It's just not in the most usable form yet. So I pull the data out and try to make some sense of it. And what we're trying to do, or what I try to do with this, is kind of look for trends and see if there's any things that can be done or to improve the safety of different intersections. And you know, the majority, I guess I'll kind of go through it. I mean, the majority of the accidents are usually at intersections. So when we look at it, that's usually what we try to focus on. So you can see here that this year, the total number of accidents it's decreased about 2% from last year. It's at 1174, it was at 1199 last year. And I think that's due to, I think this is the third one I've done. I've been here a little over 2 years. But what happened is, you can kind of see on the chart too, is when roundabouts were initially installed, there was a little bit of a spike in the 2010 to 2013 years. So what happened is, roundabouts were installed, people weren't familiar with them, the number of accidents went up, but now it's coming back down to more historic levels. Then what I look at is the number of injuries in crashes. It's increased very slightly in 2015, but as you can see, it has, since roundabouts were installed, it shows that roundabouts have done what they were intended to, and it has decreased the number of injuries and accidents. In about 2010, we were up to 609, now we're down to 350, so it's had a significant reduction. I guess, and I attribute that to that, as well as, it's possible that the new vehicle safety features might have some effect on that as well. So that's kind of the injuries. And then we look at the number involving bicycles and pedestrians. The number involving bicycles has been pretty consistent. We're at about 25, and we've been in the 20s the last couple of years. The number involving pedestrians, though, did go down significantly in 2015. It went down to actually 8, which was less than half of what it had been in previous years. Now, I can speculate that maybe some of the pedestrians decrease has been to some of the investments the city's made in infrastructure. As you've known, we've put in these rectangular, rapidly flashing beacons at a number of locations. We've changed some of the mid-block crosswalk painting style so that they have what they call a continental style with bold lines. So I'm hoping that some of those things have helped, as well as we've installed LED pedestrian countdown heads with the countdowns. That's a citywide initiative we're still continuing. So I'm hoping that that's been helpful.
Yeah, I noticed on that stop on the Oregon by the Riverwalk crossing, you got the yellow along the traffic signal. I've noticed that in some of the neighboring communities. Is that like a trend or like a mandate at all?
On Oregon.
Where the Riverwalk crossing is?
Yep.
It's got the yellow border along the traffic signal, the bright yellow.
I guess I've never noticed
on the signal
that.
head itself, Dan, or on the?
I know like a lot of like Appleton and Neenah Menasha have it, where they got on the traffic signal, you got like bright yellow. Like,
Do you have Google Earth that we can look at and
try it.
figure out what he's talking? I mean, no offense, but I want to make sure we're all talking about the same
I know,
thing.
like it seems to be pretty common, like around like the Grand Chute area, and like I said, I can't remember if it's Neenah or Menasha, but like I said, the traffic signal has the whole border has like the bright yellow around it, and that's what they have on.
But the actual 3-light signal head.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
yellow,
it's got the
green,
signal,
yellow,
like
red.
your
Okay.
signal,
Yep.
and then all the border is like a bright yellow. Like I said, I just noticed that yesterday that I was having dinner at Beckett's, and I noticed that they had the bright yellow on that Oregon.
I know the city's toyed with yours from, at one point they were all black, which
It's the first one
really
that
didn't
I've
make a lot of
noticed in the
sense.
city, and like I said,
but-
I noticed a pretty common place, like in, Grand Chute, Neenah Menasha.
Which one are you talking about? The one towards?
It's the Riverwalk one,
Oh,
You know,
the one over here.
the new one on the Riverwalk, to go across Oregon.
It's south of the bridge.
Oh,
Yeah.
you mean
Before, and it's the bridge traffic signal.
You know what I'm talking about? It's got the yellow
Yep.
boundary on it.
So if you go south of the bridge, face northbound, it's the one that they just installed.
Yeah.
The overhead?
Oh, that's
It's
the
for the
Crosswalk.
bridge.
Is
Yeah,
it-
that's the, are you talking the new, the hawk signal that we
Yeah, and it's
installed
got
as
the
part
yellow,
of
but like I
crosswalk?
said,
Oh,
in some of these
okay.
other cities,
I asked if it was a
every,
signal.
every traffic signal is like that, you know.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is, that was part of the, and I thought maybe you were talking about that, but that won't show up on here because that's
Okay.
new. That's
Like I said,
the,
that in some of the other cities around, you know, just to the north of us, that's commonplace, like all of their traffic signals are like that now.
okay.
So I was just wondering if that's like some kind of a new, like, state mandate or just a new trend or...
Yeah, I think that's, I can check on that, but that one's obviously, that's part of that hawk signal to cross the Riverwalk. So that's not a traditional traffic signal in that sense. But I haven't seen that or aware of that yet, but I will.
Yeah, like I said, I know like in Menasha and I think Grand Chute, you know, like almost all of them are converted to that, having that yellow border around them.
I'll ask my traffic
You know,
signal.
it shows up a
guy
lot
and see if-
better, you know, in the distance.
Sure.
So.
Yep. So then, you know what, I look at the accidents by intersection and then kind of by traffic signal type. And historically, as you can see, the roundabouts are generally some of the higher crash intersections. However, that number has went down. It went down quite a bit this year for those. 9th and Kohler and Jackson and Murdoch are usually up on the top of this list. And those numbers of actual crashes have went down. And then I'll get into a little bit more details as we go, but that would be, and it's expected that those will be higher crash locations just because that's where the majority of the traffic is. So they're moving lots of traffic through there. But it is good to see that people are becoming familiar with roundabouts and that those numbers are starting to trend down.
Why do you speculate Jackson, New York is so high? It doesn't seem like there's that much traffic on New York there.
Yeah, I'll actually get into that a little bit further down, but so I can answer that in a minute. But and then this is just kind of looking at accidents with injury at roundabout intersections, and the injuries per crash from pre-roundabout to post-roundabout, and for the vast majority of them, that number has went down. I guess more significant than this, though, would be, like we talked about, the total number of injuries has been going down, and obviously, and the severity of injuries has been going down. They actually classify in the DOT system the severity of crash, the A, B, or C, and so the number of the more severe crashes has actually been going down. So then what I did is I looked at the number of traffic signals, and I have to kind of pare it down to try to get some type of analysis, otherwise it just becomes too much to work with. But kind of look at the signals that had 4 or more crashes, and then look at the 5-year period. And then I also look at something, a crash rate for a 5-year period. So there's 2 different numbers that I kind of looking at. I'm looking at the total number of crashes, so the frequency, and then the rate, which is more of a number of crashes per million miles. And that's kind of what the DOT uses. So like you said, as far as the signalized intersections, Jackson and New York is one of the higher crash intersections. Sawyer and Witzel, Murdoch and Wisconsin, and I'll talk about that again in a minute. I'm just going to kind of, to pare this down a little bit, I'll talk about some of the higher interest intersections. And then what this does is it kind of shows the crash rate based on accidents per million miles, the 5-year crash rate, and then this is a new measure the DOT uses. It's the Intersection Safety Evaluation Tool. So I'm looking at the high crash intersection, so obviously they're all higher than that number. So what that number is something DOT says that, well, if you had an average 4-legged intersection with traffic signals, here's what an expected crash rate would be. It doesn't really look at locations or any specifics. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of these in particular. Sawyer and Witzel, that's been a higher crash intersection for a few years. One of the contributing factors was the reconstruction of Highway 21 a while back when we had traffic detoured there, and that added traffic. But I think in addition to being very busy with the Oshkosh Lourdes traffic there, you have Oshkosh West traffic there. You have a driveway pretty close for Taco John's. That the left turning movements off of Witzel are one of the higher occurrences. So there were 5 of those where vehicles are turning left from Witzel and crashing into an oncoming vehicle, usually in the curb lane. And we've talked about this as we talked about the road reconfiguration on Murdoch last year. And what that is, and this is probably one of the leading causes of crashes throughout the city at intersections, is when you have a 4-lane road, vehicles turning left from either direction have a hard time seeing the vehicle in the curb lane. So we try to eliminate those as much as we can as we're looking at road design. But like we did with the Murdoch and Wisconsin intersection to try to eliminate that threat. But that is still a concern at a number of intersections. And we do take that into account now when we're looking at new developments and trying to minimize those as much as we can. And what that's called is, as you can see on here, is a negative offset with the 4 lanes. And then you have a 0 offset, which we now have at a number of intersections, like Murdoch, Wisconsin, and then Knapp and 9th would be another one, where the left-turning vehicles are facing each other, so they only have to cross 1 lane of traffic. And then a best-case scenario, which is really expensive to do, is a positive offset, which would be this last one, but that would involve usually installing a median or something of that nature. West Haven and Witzel, that one, the number of crashes has increased. It's very busy with that quick trip there. What I noticed out of the crashes there, that probably one of the crashes was coded incorrectly, but of the 7 remaining, 3 were while the lights were in flash. That's another leading cause of accidents or crashes throughout the city, is when the intersection is in flash. Sometimes vehicles don't stop if they have the flashing red, or conversely, if they have the flashing yellow, they don't slow down. So what we're trying to do, and this is actually on our list to convert to actuation. So actuation means that you would either use the cameras or loop detectors in the pavement, so you know when a vehicle's there, that would trigger the signals. Where we have timed intersections, we have to put them into flash. Otherwise, if vehicles are at night, it'd be even worse because cars stop and there's nobody around, so they start running the light that way. But anyway, that's our improvement that we're going to make for that intersection this year. So those, you can kind of read through it, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of these. 44 in Washburn, I'm sure that if officers, if you've worked on that on any special event, that's the leading cause there, I think, is just people aren't paying attention when they're leaving, Country USA, Rock USA, EAA. There's quite a few incidents, and that intersection is actually not under the city jurisdiction, but I know the DOT has been working on a number of things there. And then I did want to talk about Murdoch, Wisconsin, because we did that road reconfiguration last year to create that 0 offset for the left-turning vehicles. Prior to that, it had the negative offset. And 3 of the crashes that were there were prior to the road reconfiguration, and ironically enough, they involved the left-turning vehicles being hit by oncoming in the curb lane. The second most cause were vehicles running red lights, and there were 3 of those, and then there were 2 rear-end crashes, and then there was 1 bicyclist. So with the new road reconfiguration, what we'll have to do is keep an eye on that, because we implemented it last August, so we don't even have quite a year's worth of data, and this only goes through December of 2015. So we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully that the reconfiguration eliminates some of those left turn crashes. So those are the highlights of the traffic signals, and then the all-way stop controls that Harrison and Murdoch comes out on top there. Four of them were there, and this is pretty common at an all-way stop. 4 of them were related to people get to the stop sign, everybody thinks they were there first, and 2 vehicles go at the same time. That's hard to prevent without doing some type of different traffic control. And one of them was due to a large vehicle where they couldn't see, and then the other one was an inattentive driver. The stop-controlled intersections. What I found kind of interesting here is this Kentucky and Murdoch had a really bad year, and if you're familiar with that, that's where the intersection is to enter the Fair Acres shopping center. So a lot of those accidents involve a vehicle that wants to go straight and they have to cross 4 lanes of traffic, and somehow their vision's impaired. So I know that we're very aware of that as a city, and as developments come forward, like there's a credit union that's being developed across the street where the restaurant used to be, and we did make recommendations to where their driveways should be to try to minimize that as much as possible.
Well, and can we strongly encourage restricting turning movements coming out of parking lots at that point?
Right.
It's private property, but still, and I've had this issue on a few occasions, there's a few developments that
Right.
that would apply to.
Yeah, what we can do is require right turn onlys if they don't meet the corner clearance. Like in this case, we told them they couldn't have another driveway opening on Murdoch, so the driveway opening is going to be on Kentucky. So as much as we can within the code, we do try to limit those things.
Ross?
All right, Joe.
Yes.
As you said at that corner facing Fair Acres, parking lot, that's a pretty tough corner, right? Because of the stuff up next to the road. It's a vision block. I think there's a consideration there of having that changed a little bit, especially if you're in a vehicle that sits low. Trucks and so on, 3.25 ton, no deal. But it's easy, you gotta pull out right away sometimes in order to see somebody whipping around a right turn on, around the roundabout.
So are you suggesting no left turn from Kentucky onto Murdoch? Is that what you're suggesting?
You could, because it's a short distance, and then if they wanna get over another lane, you got a
lot of jockeying,
and that's
yep.
a very busy corner. And even to go straight ahead sometimes, you gotta be careful because
Oh, yeah.
the vision to the west is very limited.
Right. Yeah, and that's where I saw the majority of them where vehicles were going straight across 4
Yeah.
lanes and they didn't quite make it all the way.
That's right.
So yeah, that's definitely something we can look at.
I think.
Again, I think we should exert as much as we can, or put as much
Because that
pressure
is-
on the developers to limit egress and, coming out of those lots. I mean, we've got full control over the city street in the case of Kentucky. I think that makes sense to at least look at limiting left-hand turns from Kentucky onto Murdoch.
We'd like to see landscaping done, rather than no landscaping, but
But we'd rather not have it littered with plastic and, glass either.
because you gotta have your vision. It's limited.
And then I'll try to, we got a little bit of a time limit today because they have a workshop in here at 5, but I'll just kind of highlight a couple other things. In High and Osceola, and that's a short block on the UWO campus, 2 of those involve vehicles trying to turn left from the right outside lane on High and striking a vehicle
So
coming
obviously
across.
unaware they were on a one-way street is what that comes down to. Is that how I read that?
Well, no, these were actually, they're turning left onto Osceola from High, and they're in the right lane on High, and they're turning left onto Osceola, and there's a car on the inside lane.
Right,
So they didn't-
so the High's a one-way street,
Right.
turning left onto Osceola, so
Right.
they're in the far right lane, they're turning left across
Right.
traffic coming from behind them, so they're turning,
You're right, yep.
Yeah.
I was thinking,
yeah, they're,
Yep.
so arguably they're unaware they're on a one-way street.
right, that could be,
And you see that quite often, which I think kind of becomes a signage issue. Can we put sharrows on one-way streets at certain, is that within our, points for directional purposes?
oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because when we put bike lanes in, we put sharrows.
Yeah,
to,
yeah, you could put like one-way arrows. Yeah, that's.
Because I've had more than one person do that to me coming up front of Leach. They'll turn left onto, by the firehouse. I can't.
Oh,
think
yeah,
of the street.
CP.
CP. Well, you're on CP and you turn left at the firehouse. and they turn from the right-hand lane, and
I see
there's
what
somebody screeching to a stop, in the left-hand lane.
Yep, I see what you're saying.
I know,
I always think it's ironic, because response time will be instantaneous, because you're right there in front of the firehouse, but still, nonetheless. Ben?
another thing, I mean, with High Avenue too, with talking about better signage, I mean, especially on graduation day, I can count on two hands how many people turn off down the one-way street
Yeah.
on High Avenue, and the signage, I think, would be a good idea.
Yeah, that's
Might be something
look into.
worth considering.
Some of these other ones were like more of the common things, that the stop signs are vehicles failing to yield. I get calls quite a bit on County Highway A and Snell, which is actually under the county jurisdiction, but it seems like there's a lot of crashes there, but there was 4 last, which is, it's not high, but it's not low. So I have talked to the county highway commissioner, and he's evaluating what his options are there as well.
Yeah, we just had a guy the last meeting.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that's always been a little bit of an anomaly. I mean, we're responsible for it, correct me, officer, if I'm wrong, but that's your jurisdiction from an enforcement perspective, but it's the county's jurisdiction from a maintenance and construction perspective, so it's kind of
Right.
odd in that regard.
Did you have any speculation on that Jackson in New York? You didn't
Oh, yes, there
get
you
back
go.
to that. It wasn't listed in our pamphlet either.
Just closed it.
Because, I mean, they've taken quite a big jump from 4 to 14.
Yeah, that one was,
That's what I,
I don't really,
Yeah.
there wasn't, I don't think, too much going on there.
yeah, it was hard, if I remember that one right, I did this a little while ago, but it was really hard to determine a trend there. There was a lot of different stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, that it should be the number one city, but it's got to be by far down the list of amount of traffic, especially from New York.
That one's on here. I don't think, oh, okay, that one, I don't think that met the, I was trying to pare down the ones I was looking at, so I'll take a look at it, see what I can find out.
Yeah, like, I mean, if you were just going to give me this list of intersections and rank them, which I thought would be the highest accident rate, I'd probably put that in the bottom third, much less number
Right.
one in the city.
Well, what I did, I looked at the total number of crashes, and then I compared it to that, the DOT and internet, or to their safety tool, and then I had to make a cutoff at some point, so I think that one must have been below the cutoff. But I got the data, so I can look at it.
It seems like kind of an anomaly that would be the number one.
Yeah, I'll let you know what I find.
All right, thanks.
Nothing stuck out at the top of my head, but it's been a little while. The only other thing I was just going to show you real quick, and I guess we don't have a lot of time to go over this, but what I did is actually work with our GIS department, and I put these on, we actually were able to map these. So what these are is the size of the dots are where there were crashes, and then they tried to kind of triangulate to create a bigger spot where there's more accidents. So this is something I'm going to look at, as we're looking at intersections and see what trends I can identify. One thing that I did identify is the stretch of Witzel between Kohler and basically Ohio. There's a few higher crash intersections along that stretch, like Eagle, Sawyer. So that's when I talked to the police department. That's something I'll ask them to maybe
That's kind of
consider
treacherous
doing
coming
more.
out of that plaza by Steins there.
Yeah, I
Basically
think-
go around and come off of Kohler. I find it a lot easier to turn coming out by the side of the movie theater.
Yep. I think we've talked about that at one other meeting,
Well,
but yeah, that is.
yeah, and again, that was one of
tricky.
those intersections that I was talking about where we should probably, if we could, exert some pressure on the developers to limit left-hand turns coming out of
Yeah,
there.
that one is tricky.
Because that's, that's a
I
disaster.
think, if you come on Kohler, like I said, down there, you're further away from the roundabout.
Yep, exactly.
Whereas you're like just coming off the roundabout.
If you come out of that
By the express station.
north side of that development and try to make a left and go westbound on Witzel, you're taking your life in your hands in some cases.
Some people come out of the roundabouts too fast, too.
Oh.
Yeah.
What did you say the common thread was? Driver error, yeah.
Driver error,
Yeah.
human error, and that Stein's Corner is a good example.
I just wanted to show you that quickly. I mean, it's kind of cool. I'm going to try to use this as, you know, if things come up and we can kind of look and see where there's trends and that type of thing.
Anyone else? Question, comment?
I have a comment.
Mr. Christensen. Oh, and by the way, officially welcome to the board.
Thank you.
I forget.
I live near the Jackson, New York section, and you're talking about trends. I see something that does appear to be somewhat of a trend to 4, 8, 8, 10, 14 for the number of accidents on the corner, which is a big concern, but a bigger concern I have is that that's a major school crossing. And it's very, it's poorly marked for the school crossing. If you, let's say if you're not familiar with the fact that there is a school crossing there, you're going to miss it. If you would be, let's say, driving down the street and maybe have a truck or something next to you, you'd miss that sign, that five-sided sign that says school crossing. If you, on South Park Avenue, we have that really nice flashing light. On Main Street, we have a really nice flashing light. And unless there's some restriction on having something like that on Jackson, I would think that would be just a terrific idea to, you know, to protect the children that are crossing, to make people aware that there is a school crossing there.
Well, the difference is that that's a signaled intersection, so vehicles actually, versus where you're talking, the ones that are on South Park in, so Minnesota 9th and South Park in Delaware, those were installed as part of the Safe Routes to School because they're not signalized intersections. So they were meant to show that there's a crossing, although there's not technically a traffic signalized intersection. We couldn't do that at New York and Jackson because it's a signalized intersection. So we couldn't install that. In addition, have the traffic control devices. And the traffic control devices are actually a higher level of traffic control than the flashing beacons are. And it's the same situation up on Jackson, where you're talking about up north of Pick and Save. It's because it's not actually a signalized intersection, so that's why they have the flashing lights. But, so, I agree with you, that is, you know, and we've installed those for those two locations a couple years ago, and then we also did them for the crossing of the Wild Wash Trail this last year, and then we also installed them on Benton Arboretum for the Wild Wash Trail as well, but you can't put those in addition to the signal because they conflict with each other.
What kind of improvement might be made because of the high rate?
Well, that's something, yeah, like I'll look at it and see if there's,
Or maybe
what the causes
something
are.
across, you know, it doesn't have to be flashing, just something that, you know, lets people know, because I know people get picked up there that probably are, you know, totally unaware there's a school crossing. If you're coming down New York Avenue going east, there are no markings for a school crossing.
Okay.
And I don't know about the other way, but I personally think this is just an accident waiting to happen involving the school children.
Well, like I said, what I'll do is I'll evaluate, I'll look and see what the causes of these are and then see
Well,
what we have for a future meeting.
Anyone else? I got the high sign that we're getting close on. Anyone else have any comments? Any questions from Mr. Collins?
Move to adjourn? Or?
Well, quickly, future agenda items. I don't want to
Okay.
cut that short. Anyone? Go ahead, Dan. What do you got?
No, I don't have any.
Go ahead, do it again.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Aye.